All right, we are live with today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. We're just getting all the cameras set up. All of the pre-show is happening. We got about 8.5 minutes before we get started. Boy, the time is just going by today. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, chat room. Thanks for being here. We got a lot going on today. There is so much happening. There's a lot of activity. I like it when it's busy. The days fly by. That's all often taken as a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. I got a lot to do. The day just goes away. Hope everybody's doing well. We got a great Security Plus study group for you today. All new questions, of course, in the first hour. I've also opened up the questions for the second hour that you can add by going to the link on your screen. We might as well put that up so you can see it. This is also where you can put your digital push pin into what we have here, the map that we have here. And if I look into the Caribbean, there's Malk. Hello, I see you in the chat as well. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like you've put a push pin in the right place. Maybe you haven't yet. So thanks for being here from St. Vincent. Malk, good to see you again. We've got all new Security Plus questions, as I mentioned. Right now, it's our pre-show, though, and I'm just making sure audio is good. So I did slightly increase the audio that is going to YouTube. I just didn't have time to test it because that's how I'm doing things today. Normally, I would run a test and check out the stats. There's some great statistics you can see, the stats for nerds, if you right mouse click on a YouTube video. And you can see information about audio and those types of things. So I've been trying to tune it in so that it's a little more standard with the industry audio. So we're getting there. The new series will all have these new audio hooks in it. And it's just constant improvement that we're trying to make on all of the training materials. Everything looks good on this side, though. I'm looking at all my stats. For those of you that haven't seen the whole Battlestar here that we have, this is the streaming side that you see a picture of me and a picture of me and a picture of me. And running at about 6 megabits per second is what I am sending to YouTube. Sending YouTube 1080p. You may notice that my live streams are not in 4K. That's because YouTube takes this stream and then they re-render it in a format that is compatible with your system. So because there is this additional rendering that takes place, there is a delay. With HD or 1080p video that I'm sending YouTube, the delay is about 10 seconds. So for what we are doing today that is interactive, it is relatively negligible. You almost don't even see it. But if I was to update that to 4K, there would be about a 20 to 30 second delay because that's 4 times as much data. So it takes a little bit longer. At least it did last time I ran some tests. And it was significantly longer. So instead of me sitting here and talking for 30 seconds before we ever start to see anyone answering a question, we just send 1080p, which I think works pretty well for what we're doing. Today is all going to be about Security Plus, but I'll take questions about anything in our after show. And of course, you can follow the link on your screen right behind me here, professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit a question for our after show at any time. We'll figure out the details on this. There is quite a bit going on. Security Plus, though, is moving right along. We've got everything in place. All of our video course has been done for quite some time now. We've got everything there. Can I upload at a higher frame rate? Well, I'm not really capturing at a higher frame rate. And quite honestly, I'm not doing a lot of motion. There's not a lot of activity going on. So higher frame rates aren't going to help very much other than to increase the amount of bandwidth that is required to watch anything. I realize you can turn it down on the YouTube side, but it does greatly affect our ability to record here. 4K at 30 frames per second, which is what I'm doing now, 29.97, is pretty much the standard. Now upping that to 60 frames a second doesn't do anything for the video. It doesn't do anything for visualizing what I'm showing you on the screen, but it doubles the amount of storage that I need on this side. And 4K at very mildly compressed ratings or rankings that I'm doing here. The type of compression that I'm doing locally is very minimal. So there's, at the end of a live stream, I've got about 600 to 700 gig of video data. So that's about 2 hours worth of data. So if I was to do this in 60 frames a second, then it would be 1.4 terabytes or so every 2 hour setting. And that's just sort of pointless for what we're doing. So it is a balancing act. If I want, I would love to do 8K running at 120 frames a second, and that would be great. But you have to balance these things out. The reality of all of this. Okay, we're going to keep going with what we've got here. It is a lot. I'm recording to SSDs. You can see my Cylons. You can't really see them very well with that in the way. My Cylons are down here to the bottom right. You can see them spinning around. That's my video recording system down here. And it is, right now, it's got 4K SSDs in it. So we could, or 4 terabyte SSDs in it. So we could record to that amount. It's just too much. It's just unnecessary. It's just too much video. I mean, I could up the audio that I'm recording, which I think I'm recording at, I don't know if I'm 256 or 384 kilobits per second. I could up that to 1024 kilobits per second. You would see and hear no difference. So there's a reason we have to kind of pick the right level. Now I'm constantly changing those and constantly tweaking them and constantly trying different things just to make sure that I'm not doing something wrong. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not, which is why I keep tweaking it. I always would like it to get better, but there's always a advantage and disadvantage to pretty much everything. So we have to keep worrying about that. We will definitely get to those pieces. We've got a lot of great questions today. Interestingly enough, I wrote these questions 2 weeks ago, which, by the way, never happens. So I've got to remember the questions myself. I went through them and tried them out myself just to make sure that they would be okay. And I think they are. Now we're about a minute and 15 seconds away from getting started with our live stream. I've had people send me notes saying, I was going to watch the live stream, but it's just the back of your head and a bunch of screens. It's not. That's not the live stream. That's just me goofing off until we get through there. We'll figure out the details of it anyway. So this should be a good time to go through and break down all of the details of what we need to work on today. So we will see what the advantages and disadvantages are to doing this 2 weeks in advance versus a week in advance. If you'd like to post a question, you go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that is on your screen. And at the top of your page there, you will see a tab that you can go to and submit questions for the second hour. Look at everybody getting on the link here. Tons of folks checking in from North America, from Europe. We got Africa checking in, the Caribbean. Well, a lot going on there. We got folks in APAC. We got lots happening right now. So this will be a great time. We'll have to figure out the details of this. Coming up in the top of the hour, it's time for me to get my act together. All right, that's working. We can get rid of our clock. We can start up Keynote. We can look for a green light, which tells us that we're doing something right for a change. There we go. I like the green light. It does a thing. Now it's time for a live stream, everybody. Top of the hour. It says that it's starting. That says 12 noon my time. That means it's time for a live stream. Why don't we do one? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2025 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the Security Plus exam objectives, and we're going to see how well you know the answers to these. If you're here live, you'll be able to put your vote into the system right away. If you are not here live, then you can certainly play along with us, follow along with us. Even though there won't be an interactive part, there sort of will be, because you're going to see it pretty much the same way that everyone else sees it as well. If you are here live and you'd like to join along with us, I would love it if you could go to this link that you see on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and that is the link that you can simply stay on for the duration of the live stream. We've got a lot to go through, But before we get into the new questions, I want to give you an old question. Not really an old question. It's really a question from last month. We call this our rewind question, just to see if you're able to get into the link at professormesser.com/QA and able to answer these questions. This one is a question, and before I tell you the question, for those of you that are new to the live stream, the way that you answer the questions is following the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers into the chat room. Please do not put any hints into the chat room. We're going to do all of our answers on that link you see on your screen. The question is, a hacker is using a cryptographic attack to gain access to system data. Which of the following would be the most likely attack type? Would it be, if I can put me on the screen here, would it be DDoS, downgrade, SQLI, on-path, or spraying? We will come back to all of these options. We'll figure out which one the right answer will be in just a moment. Just stay right where you are. Stay on that page. We will come right back to it in a moment. Thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, we do one of these live streams every month. It's always a good bit of folks here. We have such a good time going through the questions and the answers. But of course, when we're not here live, there's a lot more that's going on. Of course, our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube contains our entire Security Plus course. There's every minute of every video is out there on YouTube for you to watch for free. Everything is right there. I don't hold anything back. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's a lot there that you can find. We have videos there for Security Plus, for Network Plus, for A+. There's a few other things thrown in there every now and then. And who knows what's coming next? Nobody knows, even myself, but we'll figure it out eventually. Of course, we have a weekly Security Plus pop quiz question that we post to the service formerly known as Twitter. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X to be able to answer those questions. We also put those questions on the Instagram, so you can answer the question with a pretty picture along with it. And that, of course, is found at professormesser.com/Instagram. We also have our LinkedIn that we also put the questions on. I don't have it on this screen, but if you'd like to find that, you could probably guess where that is. It's at professormesser.com/LinkedIn. So pretty common way to do that. All of the questions that we're going to do today come from the latest version of the Security Plus exam. This is the SY0-701. This is a version of the exam that was released in November of 2023, which means that it will probably retire somewhere around May of 2027. So if you are working on your Security Plus right now and all of your study materials are specifically written for the SY0-701, then you have exactly what you need and you have plenty of time to work on these studies. It's a single exam that you need to pass. This exam is 90 minutes in length with a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions. The score that you're shooting for is a score of 750, and that is on a scale from 100 to 900. If you're familiar with the previous version of the Security Plus exam, it's the same format. It's multiple choice questions, it's performance-based questions, both of which we will do today. So if you're looking to get some familiarity with the type of questions that you might see on your exam, you're in the right place. Of course, we not only have videos on YouTube, we also have other training materials that might help you with your studies. I have course notes, practice exams, downloadable versions of the videos. I have the video, audio, and MP3 format so that you can take it in your car or when you're working out. And of course, my exclusive Exam Hacks ebook that you cannot buy. It is only available if you purchase a Success Bundle or if you purchase a voucher. And that is something that you might want to look at. It's on our website at professormesser.com/701SB. If you would like to have a replay of this live stream available, it is available immediately after we are done on YouTube. And it takes me a bit of time to edit and put a podcast audio only version available on our site as well. If you're subscribed to us on your favorite podcast listening service, you'll certainly find us there. You could also manually add it to your podcast listening program by going to professormesser.com/podcast. And I also have us available on your favorite streaming audio service. So if you're on something like Spotify, simply search for Professor Messer and all of our podcasts will come up there as well. Very easy to find us. You'll notice about a day after we post this on YouTube that the YouTube video description will be updated with a series of timestamps. These timestamps have been created by my marketing manager, Lori, who is going through this video. Hi, Lori. She's going through this video probably at 2x speed, figuring out where all the timestamps are and putting in those descriptions in the video description. And you can go back years to find exactly what you are looking for in these live streams, something that might help you as you are going through your studies. Also, something that might help you for your studies is when we are done here, you can always find us over on Discord. That is our chat, 24/7 chat, where there are thousands of people subscribed that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and others. It's a great group of people over there, and we have a lot of fun. You can go to professormesser.com/discord to join the Discord link. Eventually, you will need to take your Security Plus exam, and the Security Plus exam does cost money. There is that part of it. Fortunately, there are discounts available. If you happen to be in the US or Canada or US territory, you can purchase your voucher by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. And as I've already mentioned, if you purchase a voucher on my site, I even give you something a little bit extra that you can't get anywhere else. It's my Exam Hacks ebook. This is something included for free that has tips and tricks on how you can study for the exam and tips and tricks that might help you during the exam itself. You can get a couple of extra points during your exam to do that. So this is something to think about as you are planning to take your exam. Where could you save a little bit of money? professormesser.com/vouchers. Now let's go through the question we asked earlier, which asks, a hacker is using a cryptographic attack to gain access to a system data. Which of the following would be the most likely attack type? Made the same mistake second time through. DDoS, downgrade, SQLi, on path, or spraying. Let's see what you chose in this list. A cryptographic attack. We're a little bit torn. 44% of us say the answer is a downgrade attack. 26% of you say the answer is SQLi. That's not how you pronounce that. 14% say the answer is on path, 8% say DDoS, and 7% say spraying. Well, if there is a cryptographic part to the attack, that is going to limit what those attacks might be. So as we are going through and trying to understand the details of this, it might be useful to know which one of these attacks is not associated with cryptography. Good example of this might be a DDoS. A DDoS does not naturally assume there's any type of cryptography associated with this. So cryptography itself is not part of DDoS, so we can't use that one. Only 8% of you chose that one. Same thing with spraying. A spraying attack is when somebody is using a single username and password to try to gain access on a brute force method, but only doing a few at a time so as not to alarm or alert anyone that that's happening. So that is exactly what we would focus on with that particular response. So neither of those are cryptography or cryptographic related. An on-path attack is someone sitting in the middle of a conversation that may or may not have a cryptographic function, but because it does, there are many types of on-path attacks that have nothing to do with cryptography. So when you get into that scenario, we know that the answer would not be on path because that would not be the most likely attack type when compared to the others. This will be very clear in a moment. We also have a SQL injection. That's what SQLi is. Or we call it squirrel. We call it a squirrel injection here in the South. SQL injections or SQL injections are commonly used to gain access to a database through usually a web-based front end, but it has nothing to do with cryptography. We're not taking advantage of any cryptographic vulnerabilities or something unusual there with the cryptography. There's really no cryptography associated with that. The one thing that's left, the only other answer here is the downgrade attack. And a downgrade attack is one that takes advantage of a vulnerability to either decrease or completely remove any type of encryption or protection that you might have over a specific session. So downgrade attacks are things like a SSL stripping. Very good example of a downgrade attack. It's not the only type of downgrade attack, but it's a very common version of a downgrade attack. There has to be exactly the right scenario in place to be able to perform this type of attack. To be fair, pretty much any attack needs to be exactly the right scenario, but this one does have to be very specific. And so you'd have to be not only in the middle of a conversation with an on-path attack, but then you have to have everything in place that would allow you to perform this SSL stripping function. In this video that I have for SSL stripping, which is in my 701 course, section 2.4, it is aptly named, this video is aptly named Cryptographic Attacks. I do give you a scenario of how someone is able to implement an SSL stripping attack. So I take you through a little bit of an animation that breaks down the entire thing for you. So if you're still not sure how this would work, I show you in that video. You can certainly go back there and look at more detail. That is the answer that we were looking for. The downgrade attack, 44% of you chose that answer, and you got it absolutely right. That is the answer we were hoping for. That is the cryptographic attack that someone could use to gain access to system data. So hopefully some of you are familiar with some of those options. Now let's do something new. That was a question from last month. Let's do a new question that you've never seen before. And as many of you know, our first new question of the month is a performance-based question. For those of you that are not familiar with performance-based questions, perhaps you've never taken a CompTIA exam before. The CompTIA exam is more than just multiple choice questions. For example, the question we just had was a multiple choice question. There was a question, and then there were multiple answers to choose from. Even if you didn't know the answer, it was a 20% chance you could get it right if you guessed. Well, CompTIA wants to give you some questions that don't give you that level of guessability. They don't want to give you a gimme, or at least something that would give you an advantage, even if you didn't know the topic. They want to really test if you know these topics. So a performance-based question, as CompTIA defines it, is one that is simply not multiple choice. This could be fill in the blank. You could be put at a command prompt. There aren't any command prompts for Security Plus, but on other CompTIA commands, CompTIA exams, you might get that. You might have a matching question, a drag and drop question. You might get a question where you have to put things in a particular order. There's a lot of different ways to ask a question. So this is just another way to ask you about things that you already know about. Don't get really upset about these performance-based questions. If you know the exam objectives, these will be a walk in the park for you. Let's see how much of a park walk we have today. We have a question for you today that is kind of a fill-in-the-blank question, more of a drag and drop if you want to think of it that way. And here is your question. On this question, I want you to tell me if these scenarios are data in transit, data in use, or data at rest. So we have 6 different options here, and I want you to tell me for each one of these, which one of these three scenarios would fit. Let's walk through them. The first one is the format of a credit card number is evaluated before the approval process. Something that commonly happens when you type in a credit card number. But is that data in transit, data in use, or data at rest? Next one is the expiration date of a driver license is rejected when added to an online form. Is that data in transit, data in use, or data at rest? Next one is a digital wallet stores all data with AES encryption. The next one is a packet capture shows a database transfer is occurring in the clear. Next one is a backup drive contains all of the source code used for a critical application. And the last one is all employee flash drives automatically store data in a protected form. So those are the 6 different descriptions that I would like you to choose, either data in transit, data in use, or data at rest. Now, as always, of course, please do not put any answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to use the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Not a lot of people locked in their answers yet. So we're thinking about whether we know this one or not know this one. One thing I will mention to you is that you need to remember what your answers were, because once you lock them in, I'm not sure we can see the answers that you may have submitted. So you probably will remember them as we go through them. So this is more of a fill in the blank, if you will, because that's just an easier way to do it in the format that we are using on our screen here. Hopefully you are familiar with these. These states of data are important to keep in mind. There are different ways to provide security for different states of this data. So when you're looking at a scenario, you need to understand the data state so that you can then set the proper security for that data. There's different types of security mechanisms depending on what that state of data might be. And we'll talk about what we might use to secure some of this data when we go through the answers that you are submitting at the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. I always enjoy putting together the performance-based questions. For Security Plus, it's a little more difficult because this latest iteration of Security Plus is one that is slightly different for what we are using for all of these. Hopefully you're familiar with what these are. I know there's some slight wording differences in the Vevox version of this. Don't worry about those. Follow what's on the screen here, and I think you'll be just fine with this one. I did change things up at the last minute because I wanted to make it a little more clear as to what I wanted to get across to you. Yeah, it's not even close to being the same. So don't worry about the Vevox piece. Focus on what you see on the screen here. That is right next to me, right underneath my head here. Go look at those. Which side is it? It's that side. It's over here. So go look down there at those. I can't do it in the mirror. I cannot do it backwards. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these. Let's step through each one of these and see if we can figure out what you think the right answer might be, or what you would change it to if you were working through all of these. Let's start with the very first one that is on our list, which says the format of a credit card number is evaluated before the approval process. This is something you may not realize, is that credit card numbers are not just a random set of numbers. There is an algorithm that is used to verify that the number is correct. Ideally, this would work that if you just typed in a bunch of random numbers, it wouldn't work. You don't want somebody being able to do that and somehow being able to purchase a product using someone else's credit card number. So it has to be a very specific set of numbers that when you run an algorithm across this, you're able to confirm that it's a valid credit card number. So just a little bit of background. That's why this question is saying we have to evaluate that credit card number before it is sent in for approval, just to make sure we're not sending in just a random bunch of numbers that have nothing to do with a credit card. Because we are evaluating this, and because it is an evaluation that is occurring in the CPU and memory of a system, it's an active transaction. We refer to this as being in use. Data in use is data that we are actively performing some type of transaction on. We are working through the details of evaluating, manipulating, changing, performing a calculation, doing something with that data in active memory and active CPU. That is data in use. Next one on our list is the expiration date of a driver license is rejected when added to an online form. So if you're typing in an online form and you type in an expiration date, but it's the wrong expiration date, it will tell you, nope, that doesn't work. We weren't able to do that. We weren't able to, the expiration date is too late. Your driver license is not, it's not currently active. It's invalid because the license is rejected when you tried to put it into an online form. How do I know this? Because this happened to me, because I was trying to get my driver license updated and didn't work out so well. And because it was able to make that evaluation in real time as I'm typing it into a web form, this is also data in use. This is something where the data is active. It's in memory. It's in CPU. We're performing a transaction. We're evaluating that data. We're looking at it. We're manipulating it in some way. That is data in use. Next on our list is a digital wallet stores all data with AES encryption. My digital wallet does store data with AES encryptions. That's a pretty good description of that. And if we were to look at the data stored on a digital wallet, it could be something like this where the data is just on a USB drive. So that digital wallet, that data being stored means that the data is at rest. No, it's not taking a nap. It's not taking it easy. It's not on vacation. It's simply sitting there on a storage device. We're not accessing it. We're not performing any calculations. We're not retrieving it. We're not saving it. It's simply just sitting on a storage device or a storage mechanism. So that is what we refer to as data at rest. Next on our list is a packet capture shows a database transfer is occurring in the clear. Now, in this case, we are not referring to the data that has been captured necessarily. We're also not referring to how this transaction is occurring. We're talking about data that's going across the network, and all of that data that's going across the network is not encrypted. Probably not what we wanted, and now we'll need to enable some type of encryption for this database transaction. But because we can see that data going across the network, it is actively being transferred between one device and another. That is data in transit. Data in transit. So that is one where if it's on a network link, it's on a wireless connection, it's going between one device and another, it's always going to be data in transit. Next on our list is a company uses high-speed network links to transfer database replication. And that's probably what you want if you're replicating databases, especially if you're replicating databases between different data centers, then you probably do want a high-speed link. So if we're using that, we're sending data. Every time we update this database, it sends and updates and synchronizes that data to a separate database server somewhere else. Whenever we're doing that over these high-speed network links, that's right, data in transit again. That is one where we are transferring data between one device and another over a network connection. Therefore, it's data in transit. Last one on our list is a backup drive contains all of the source code used for a critical application. Now, you could do the math here and see that I'm doing a relatively balanced job of putting answers into this list. So that one might be a little bit of a gimme as you're working through the details. So in this case, because we have source code, it's on a backup drive, and it's just sitting there, that would be data at rest. So those are the 6 scenarios. The format of a credit card number is evaluated before the approval process is in use. The expiration date of a driver license that is rejected when putting it into an online form is also data in use. A digital wallet storing all data with AES encryption is data at rest. A packet capture showing a database transfer occurring in the clear. At first, that's kind of bad. We don't want that. And it's data in transit. A company using a high-speed network link to transfer database replication data is also data in transit. And a backup drive containing all of the source code used by a critical application is data at rest. Hopefully you're now more familiar with these 3 terms, how we use them, how those states of data might work. Data in use, being in the active memory of a system, relies on some type of agent or some type of mechanism in the operating system to keep that data safe. There's lots of different ways to do that. We have data at rest. That is when it's being stored on a storage device. Normally when we're doing that and we want to protect that data, you would want to encrypt that data in some way. Of course, there's lots of ways to encrypt data, but if we're storing it on a drive, you might also want to make sure that nobody else can read that data if they happen to get physical access to that storage drive. And lastly, data in transit means it's going across a network. So hopefully you're using some type of VPN, you're using some type of data encryption built into the application in order to make sure that all of that data is protected. That way, if somebody does take a packet capture somewhere along the way, they would have no idea what was inside of that data. So knowing the state of the data helps you determine how you're going to protect that data. And of course, that's an important part when you're working through the Security Plus exam. Well, hopefully you did pretty well with that one. That is a very good example of a performance-based question. And if you are preparing for your exam, make sure you also prepare for a series of performance-based questions. You can not only see the one that we did here, you can, of course, go back to our previous study groups. We do a new performance-based question every month. For now, though, let's jump back to a multiple choice-based question. This next question, again, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room, is a question that asks, a company has performed a vulnerability scan of a server, but the scan did not identify any vulnerabilities that currently exist on the server. Which of the following would best describe this situation? Would that be zero trust, data masking, false negative, impersonation, or spraying? A company has performed a vulnerability scan of a server, but the scan did not identify any vulnerabilities that currently exist on the server. Which of the following would best describe this situation? Would it be zero trust, data masking, false negative, impersonation, or spraying? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can, of course, answer this particular question. Maybe you're already familiar with this particular set of topics, or maybe you know some of the answers that are here already. All 5 of those answers do come directly from your CompTIA exam objectives. So you should be familiar with all 5 of these. If any of these look unusual or you're just not quite sure what that's talking about, make a note of it so that you can go back later, look up that topic, and get a little more familiar with what might be right or what might be wrong. And we'll, of course, go through them in the answer part of this as well. A lot to go through in this list of different things. Maybe you are familiar with some of these topics that are on the exam. Make sure that you are familiar with this one as well. All of these will help you as you go through the studies. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company has performed a vulnerability scan of a server, but the scan did not identify any of the vulnerabilities that currently exist on the server. Which of the following would best describe this situation? Is that zero trust, data masking, false negative, impersonation, or spraying? We're going to close the poll and see what you chose. Large number, 88%, say the answer is false negative. We had 7% that say zero trust, 4% say data masking, and then 0% say impersonation, and 0% say spraying. I could see why you wouldn't choose spraying. We've already talked about spraying earlier in this live study group, so maybe that's one we could just take off the list already. But impersonation, it's interesting we didn't get any choices of that. But we had such a broad number, such a large number of people that say false negative. Maybe we should look at that one a little closer to understand what the answer might be in this particular option. The one that we have here is one where we're dealing with information that's false. And this is not an unusual thing when it comes to IT security. You are dealing with all kinds of data, alerts, alarms, and a lot of different things that are happening behind the scenes. So it's important to know what you do when something isn't quite right. Now, if you are getting a message that there's a vulnerability in a system and you went to look at that system and you can't find anything, there's no vulnerability, everything is exactly as it should be, your scans came up negative, there's nothing that's been changed since you've installed the software, everything is as it is, and that's probably a scanning error. It's probably telling you there's a vulnerability, but there really isn't one. And if that's the case, we refer to that as a false positive. So that is something that does run into a challenge when you're trying to find problems. But that wasn't the problem that we had in this question. In this question, we know there's a vulnerability on this server, but we scanned it with our vulnerability scanner. Our vulnerability scanner said, no, it's fine. Your server's great. There's not a vulnerability there, but we know there's a vulnerability on this server. So we refer to that as a false negative, which means that a vulnerability exists on that device, but we were told there isn't one, which in many ways is a much worse problem than a false positive. A false positive isn't going to hurt you. All it does is take up your time as you're trying to narrow down whether it's real or not. But imagine a false negative. You get no notification that anything has happened. You get no alarming or alerting that a vulnerability exists. You go about your day as if everything's perfectly fine, except it's not perfectly fine because a vulnerability really does exist on that system. Maybe you didn't update the signatures that are in your vulnerability scanner. Maybe you should contact the vulnerability scanner manufacturer and determine why this was not able to find that vulnerability. This is a very unusual situation that you know there's a vulnerability and the scanner didn't give you one. In many cases, you simply won't get any notifications and you go through your day not knowing that you are vulnerable to a particular issue. So that is why 89% of you chose false negative as the proper response, because that's what it is. It is a false negative that we've run into. 7% said zero trust. Zero trust is a very broad term that describes the idea of never trusting anybody else on your network. This is a common problem in many organizations. We focused so much on keeping out any attackers from coming into our private network that many times we forget that we also need to secure our internal network as well. And so one of the ways that you can do that, and a good philosophy to follow, is the zero trust philosophy, which says, don't trust anybody on the network. Just because they're inside the building, just because they're on our local network, doesn't mean we should trust them. We should put up additional security measures. We should make sure that people are authenticating properly. That is what zero trust is about. That's not the scenario we have for this question. And we have 4% that's a data masking. That's a mechanism, a technique that we use to hide data from human eyes. If you have a receipt that you've gotten somewhere, you'll notice the receipt has crossed out or has asterisks where your credit card number might be or your debit number might be. It is masking those numbers so that someone else can't gain access to your important credit card number and information. So that is something that can really help to do that. Now, we also have impersonation, which is someone who's pretending to be someone else. Clearly not the issue we have here. 0% chose that one. And 0% chose spraying. We've already talked about spraying as just simply using 2 or 3 attempts to brute force an account. And if we don't get a hit, we go to the next account so that we don't raise any alarms or alerts. That's also not the scenario we have here. The scenario here very clearly is a false negative, and that's what 88% of you chose. Very good example of that. Let's go to another set of questions, another set that might give you an idea of something you can use for your Security Plus exam. This question asks, a company is expecting to lose $20,000 of laptops this year due to theft. Which of the following best describes this expense? Is this ARO, SLE, ALE, AV, or EF? It's just a bunch of letters. Is it any of them? Yes, it is. It is one of them. The question again asks, a company is expecting to lose $20,000 of laptops this year due to theft. Which of the following best describes this expense? Is it ARO, SLE, ALE, AV, or EF? Let's see if you know what the answers are for this one. This might be a good one for you to step through. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these abbreviations. If you are, then you might be able to step through these. If you're not familiar with the abbreviations, then this question gets a little more harder, a little more difficult, a little more challenging. Let's see how we do with this one. Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's see how well you do with this one. We have to know these. We have on the exam, you might even have to do calculations using these abbreviations, if that helps. So let's see how you do with the details of this one. This might be one that you could work through. Let's see what many of you answered for this one. The question is, a company is expecting to lose $20,000 of laptops this year due to theft. Which of the following best describes this expense? Is it ARO, SLE, ALE, AV, or EF? What did you choose? Let's see what you chose. 69% of you say the answer is ALE, 17% say SLE, and then we go to single digits. 4% said EF, 8% say ARO, and 2% say AV. So we got a number of different options there to choose from. Let's see what I think the answer might be. The way we describe these different risk assessments where we are looking at raw numbers, that is a quantity that we are breaking down, that we're trying to understand. So we refer to this as quantitative risk assessment. And so, for example, one of the answers that we had, 17% of you chose, was SLE. That stands for a single loss expectancy. That means that when something happens, when a loss occurs, and it occurs one time, how much money is associated with that loss? what would it be? So this is when you start breaking this down and trying to understand the specifics of it. We need to really get more familiar with how much money we really are spending each time one of these events occurs. So this might be a good one to step through and understand. But in our case, we're losing $20,000 of laptops this year due to the theft. Laptops, multiple thefts are occurring that are adding up to $20,000. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more perspective on what we're doing, but a single loss expectancy, that doesn't really apply. That doesn't really work there as well. So let's see what the next one is in our list. An ALE that is also listed. This is the one that most of you chose. About 70% of you chose this one in the answer. An annualized loss expectancy. This means that we've taken all of those losses that we've had for the entire year, we've added them all up, and that is how much we're going to lose for the year. This is a great statistic to have if you're planning on budgeting, if you're planning to determine how much money do we need to keep in a separate fund for loss and theft. This is the number for the year that you're going to want to use, ALE, to be able to do that. There is also other types of values we have to know, things like an annualized rate of occurrence, an ARO, which means how many times did this happen? How many times did we have a problem with people stealing a laptop? Did it happen one time? In this case, it probably happened about 20 times because we had $20,000 worth of loss. I'm just estimating in this scenario that each laptop is worth about $1,000. So that would mean the ARO is 20 for an annualized loss, a rate of occurrence for these losses. So in this case, we did have ARO on our list. Only 8% of you chose ARO. There's other values you should know as well. AV, for example, is the asset value. That is how much that asset is worth to the organization in a dollar value. So it's an important value to know. AV was part of the answers that we had. Only 2% of you chose that one. And then EF is another answer we had. 4% of you chose EF. That is an exposure factor. That means that if we lose part of that particular asset, that commonly doesn't happen with a laptop, but with other losses, maybe you only lost half of it. In that particular case, that means that we have a 0.5 exposure factor associated with that. If we lose the entire laptop, which most often happens, losing the entire asset is an EF of 1. So we lose everything 100% through that one. So those are the different answers for this question. We went through ARO, SLE, AV, and EF. Now we understand why those are not going to work for us. And then the one that absolutely is the right answer is your annualized loss expectancy. About 70% of you chose that one. You got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, as you've already seen in this set of questions that we are going through, there's a lot that you have to know on Security Plus. From cryptography, we need to understand policies and procedures. We need to understand how to protect data. We have these rules and regulations that we have to have an understanding. There's mobile security and different tools that we would want to use. All of this makes a training course for my videos, 121 videos. It's over 15 hours of content. And I think if you were someone who was working through your studies, I would want you to watch all 121 videos. I would want you to see all 15 hours of this content. Not everybody has that level of time, though. Not everybody wants to go through every single video. And because of that, I created kind of a shortcut of everything that's in my videos. I refer to this as my Security Plus course notes. This is the PDF version of the course notes, and every bit of text, all of the graphics, all of the tables that are important that are from my videos are also in this document. This gives you a complete summarization of everything. Obviously, it doesn't replace watching the video. These are notes that are brought from the video, but it does give you a place where everything is consolidated into one single set of notes. This is the physical version that I'm holding in my hand here. It's identical to the digital PDF that you see on the screen here. Those course notes are available on my website. And you can find them at professormesser.com/701cn. Maybe this can help you retain that information that you've spent so much time going through videos and studying. Might be a good way to help summarize everything as you are going through that final push, getting ready for that particular exam. So hopefully you're familiar with these. Maybe this is something that can really, really help you as you are going through your studies. Maybe you're not sure if you've really retained everything. This might be a good way to test yourself. You can find out more on my website, professormesser.com/701cn. Let's do another question, shall we? Next on our list is this question that asks, a company has placed a set of fake API credentials in a protected area of their website. The credentials have just been found in a public search engine. Which of the following would best describe the use of these credentials? Is it data masking, XSS, extended detection and response, OSINT, or honey token? These are all real things. So if you're going through these are all things that are actually used for this. If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please know hints in the chat room. Please know answers in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we are in our exam and working through the details of what happens to be on this list. This might be a good one if you are someone who is trying to work through this security problem. We'll figure out what this security problem might be and see if it's something you're familiar with in the details. This is used all the time, by the way. I don't want to give too much away. This is a very useful security tool. We'll step through what this might be and how we would use any of these pieces to be able to help protect our network, help protect our data, and make our systems even more secure. This might be useful. This is used by a lot of people. So this is definitely something you should be familiar with as you are working through understanding the different techniques, the different nomenclature. And again, all 5 of these answers are directly from your exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with all 5 of these different technologies. I'll keep them very broad in my description. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company has placed a set of fake API credentials in a protected area of their website. The credentials have just been found on a public search engine. Which of the following would best describe the use of these credentials? Is it data masking, XSS, extended detection and response, OSINT, or honey token? What did you choose? Let's find out. We'll close the poll, and we can see here that 84%, large numbers say it's honey token. But is it really? We'll find out in a moment. OSINT came in at 6%. We have 5% of you that said data masking, 3% say XSS, and then 2% say extended detection and response, or XDR, for those of you familiar with it. Well, if somebody's putting API credentials on their site, but the API credentials themselves aren't real credentials, they're fake credentials, they're specifically put there to act as a canary in a coal mine. You're looking to see if those credentials that are in a protected area somehow escape the protected area. They don't really escape. Somebody goes in and breaks them out. It's the attackers that find their way into our website that have somehow managed to find their way in to gain access to all of those. Might be a good one to think about as you're going through the details. The thing that would provide that level of monitoring is a technique known as a honey token. This is one where we are going to put some type of data into a place that normally would be protected. And that data is something that's so unique that if we ever see it show up outside of our network, we know that it must have come from this location. We know that it had to be that data originally. So it's a good way to track back where data may have come from. So things like API credentials is a perfect place. Attackers love API credentials. They think API credentials are delicious, and they want to be able to get their hands on them because they give you a lot of access. So putting some API credentials on a website and having those credentials somehow make it out of the website may indicate that that server is not as secure as you perhaps think it is. In fact, everything on that server is now at question. Somebody gained a lot of access to those details. So that is one that might be more of a challenge. Maybe you put a fake email address into a list. Attackers also love email addresses. Anytime they can grab some more data that they can spam on, they love it. So make up an email address for your network that is not associated with anybody and have it in that list. And that way, if you ever see that email list out in the wild, out on the internet somewhere, you know that somebody got into an area where they should not have been. Give you another warning about something that may come up. And of course, you can create honey tokens everywhere on a database record inside of a browser cookie, maybe a pixel that's on a web page, lots of ways to determine if somebody has gained access to an area or to data that they should not have gained access to. And indeed, that is the answer most of you chose, honey token. This is 84% of the answers on here. So hopefully that is something that you are very familiar with. Looks like you did a great job with this one. 6% of you say OSINT. This is the open source information that we can gather from many different open source organizations and techniques and databases and data stores. So if you're going out to Facebook, going out to LinkedIn, going to find information that is in a public forum, that is open source intelligence, or OSINT. We also have XSS. Well, let's do data masking. 5% of you said data masking. We've already talked about data masking. Those are the asterisks that are on your receipts. We also have 3% that said XSS, cross-site scripting. This particular vulnerability is not associated with cross-site scripting, although it is possible that somebody got access to the data by using some type of attack that could potentially have been cross-site scripting. That's just one of the many ways that somebody might have found a way in to get that data. But we were talking about what would describe the use of these API credentials. The use of the API credentials is not directly associated with cross-site scripting. And then we have extended detection and response. XDR is the abbreviation for that one. XDR describes, if you will, the next generation of antivirus and anti-malware, in the next generation of system protection technologies. In this particular case, we're not talking about protecting a system. We're talking about this unique data that somehow makes its way out of our network. And in that case, the answer is indeed a honey token to be able to work through that. Let's now shift gears to making a system. Now that we know that our server somebody has gotten in and grabbed the API credentials, then maybe now we should start working on that problem. So our next question asks, which of the following would best describe a system hardening technique? Would it be the installation of ultrasonic sensors, offsite backups, well-documented playbooks, connection to a generator, or removal of unnecessary software? Got a few options there. Again, the question asks, which of the following would best describe a system hardening technique? Is this the installation of ultrasonic sensors, offsite backups, well-documented playbooks, connection to a generator, or removal of unnecessary software? See if you know what the answer might be. This might be a good one to walk through to understand. Hopefully, these are something that you are familiar with as you're going through the details. This also might be something that can really help you. There are some questions in the chat room recently about donations. Well, we don't take donations. So this is all free for you. You get to go through the whole thing. This isn't like there's nothing you need to push a button to provide any more of this. Nope. All you have to do is simply hang out with me and watch this live stream, and you're good. We've got lots of folks that are watching the videos. Folks are taking advantage of the course notes. They're using the practice exams. That is donation enough. You guys are doing a great job with that. But I really do appreciate you asking. That is perhaps even nicer just to know. So thank you for that. Let's see how you did with this question. It asked, which of the following would best describe a system hardening technique? Is it the installation of ultrasonic sensors, offsite backups, well-documented playbooks, connection to a generator, or the removal of unnecessary software? What did you choose as a system hardening technique? Well, we could have used this on our server that apparently API credentials got out of. And for that scenario, 79% of you say it's the removal of unnecessary software that is a system hardening technique. 9% said offsite backups would be a system hardening technique. The one that I chose, the one that I thought people would choose, would be the 7% that say the installation of ultrasonic sensors, which are sort of hardening techniques. We'll go to that one. Well-documented playbooks got 4%, and then connection to a generator got 2%. So let's take the scenario that we had in that previous question. We had some API credentials. We stored them on a web server in a directory that no one should have access to. So how did people get access to it? How did that happen? We are wondering why that became an issue. So we need to do something with the server to make it more difficult for someone to gain access to those areas. So that would be, from a system hardening technique, removing unnecessary software is the answer that we were looking for. This is what you would do to be able to make sure that there are as few methods available for attackers to use when they're trying to gain access to this system. Every time we install new software, every time we put a new application, every time we install a new server, every time we open a port number in a firewall, every time we do anything on a system, it has the potential to make it even more vulnerable. There are vulnerabilities inside the software that we are using today that we don't know about. If you're using Windows right now, there are vulnerabilities in Windows we don't know about. Hopefully nobody knows about it yet, and Microsoft will find out first and create patches for us, but it's in there. Attackers are working every day to find these vulnerabilities before the good guys do. That way they can take advantage of them. We also have scenarios where somebody may be have installed software or service, and now they're not using it anymore, but the service is just sitting there open to the world. So that's a very good place where if we disabled, maybe we installed a file transfer software, we installed FTP. Well, FTP uses username and passwords, a great place for an attacker to try to gain access to a system. So that is certainly a good place to go for those different pieces. Hopefully you're familiar with these different techniques. And indeed, if we look, 79% of you were very familiar with this piece of it. 79% of you said that the answer is indeed removal of unnecessary software. That's what you would choose for that particular connection. Now, there were other answers in here you didn't choose. 9% of you said offsite backups was the answer you were hoping for. Offsite backups are indeed useful and you should have them, but they're not part of a system hardening technique. Simply backing up a system doesn't somehow now make it more difficult for someone to attack. It might help you a lot when you need to restore from that attack, but it doesn't make the system harder to access. The system hardening is what we were trying to get to. 7% of you said the installation of ultrasonic sensors. These are sensors that are commonly used to detect things like glass breaking. Ultrasonic sensors are very common. You probably even have some in your home if you have an alarm system in your home. They're commonly used, and we, of course, would have them in a data center or protected area as well, but that is not a system hardening technique. That is more of a building hardening technique, if you will. 4% of you, rather, said well-documented playbooks. Playbooks are also extremely important. They document a set of standard processes and procedures you would follow if a certain scenario was to occur, but that is an after the fact. After the attack has occurred, how can we react to that? So playbooks are useful, but only after something has happened. And then connection to a generator. That's certainly an important thing to consider to keep systems up and running and maintain availability to our data. But of course, that is not something that can really help you very much if you were trying to harden a system. A generator's not going to help you much. In this case, 79% of you said removal of unnecessary software is what we were shooting for. And indeed, that is the right answer. That's what we were hoping for. Maybe that is the answer that you came up with. And if it was, you got that one absolutely correct. Exactly where you should go with that one. We do have a little time left, so let's try to get through one more question that we have here. Let's see how this one might fit into our different questions. This one asks, which of the following would best describe the use of a VLAN? Which of these would best describe the use of a VLAN? And we have a number of options for you, of course. Would it be logical segmentation, containerization, data at rest, tokenization, or fail open. We've got a few to go through here and work through. Let's see if you know the answers to any of these. The question again asks, which of the following would best describe the use of a VLAN? Is it logical segmentation, containerization, data at rest, tokenization, or fail open? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to answer this question. A lot of people getting their answers in very quickly on this one. Maybe this is another one we're very secure about, that we really know the answers to be able to work through the details. Let's see if we do know the answers in this case. If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This is one that might help you if you're planning to implement VLANs. You need to know exactly why you might be wanting to do that. It might be something useful as you are going through your security plus studies. One interesting thing about security, and people don't often think about this is coming from my perspective of someone who's worked as a systems engineer at a next generation firewall company, is that most of what you are doing is networking. A huge amount of what you are doing, I would say a majority of your tasks are about planning, designing, and implementing security technologies on the network. There are, of course, other parts of this that extend out into operating systems and to other parts of your networks. But there's so much networking in security that you really do need to become an expert in networking if you're ever hoping to be an expert in IT security. Just another thing to think about. We often sort of don't think about where the security part is, but a lot of that security is in implementing a firewall, integrating a VLAN into the network, working with different routing technologies, understanding where we might want to put a VPN connection, a site-to-site VPN. These are the techniques that we need to know when we're dealing with networking. And you do need to be an expert. Somebody said CCNA level expertise. Oh, no. More, better, higher. CCNP at a minimum would be ideal. You need to be someone who is very familiar enough with networking that you can design a network from scratch for any particular use case and understand the advantages and disadvantages of each part and every component of that network. So make sure you're familiar with that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would best describe the use of a VLAN? Is it logical segmentation, containerization, data at rest, tokenization, or fail open? Which one is it? Let's see what you chose. We have 84% of you that say logical segmentation. We have 11% that said containerization. 4% say tokenization. Only 1% say data at rest. Good for you. And only 1% say fail open. Wouldn't that be great if that was the answer, though? It's the 1% is fail open. In this case, it's really not. Whenever we're trying to segment the network, we used to do segmentation by taking separate devices and making a separate network or separate connection on a separate physical device. So if you had customer A, you'd put them on one switch, customer B, you put them on another switch. That's kind of expensive going through that. You have to buy two switches. You have to maintain the software in two switches. You have to maintain separate configurations. There's extra space that's taking in the rack. And as you can see here, there's only two devices on each network. There's another 14 or more, 22 different interfaces on this particular switch that are just blank and empty. Nobody's using. What a waste of money. What if we were able to put everything on one single switch, but we were able to logically segment the switch as if it was two different switches? And the way you would do that is through the use of virtual local area networks, or VLANs. This is what VLANs do. Is they are able to segment out different broadcast domains, and each one of these VLANs is its own little world. One VLAN can't talk to another VLAN. They can't. They're separate broadcast domains, and by definition, or should be definition, by the best standards, these would also be separate subnets. And the only way that you would be able to communicate between those VLANs, between those different subnets, is to use a router. So that's a very good example when you might want to run into something like that. So hopefully you're familiar with these, the different scenarios that you would run into. But VLANs are an important way to separate a network, keep it secure, and yet use the same equipment that you already have without adding more to the network. That's exactly what the answer is. 84% of you knew that's what the answer was, and that's what you would use to have that logical segmentation. 11% of you said containerization. Containerization has a number of different terms and different words that are used, but in most cases, containerization is referring to different applications that are put into separate containers that you can deploy very easily and very quickly. So that's a very good example of making your deployment process much easier, making the cloud-based infrastructure much more flexible, but it doesn't describe the use of a VLAN. We have 4% that say tokenization. It's a little different than the other types of technologies that we were working with, but tokenization is where you are sending, instead of, for instance, sending a credit card number across the network, you send a token of the credit card number that has already been predefined on both sides of the conversation, so that if somebody does gain access to that network data and they are able to look at that number, it's a one-time use number. So they can't use it to somehow charge things on your credit card. If you are using, for example, Apple Pay or Google Pay, you're not sending your credit card number across the network. You're sending a token across the network, which is why it is much more secure to use Apple Pay or Google Pay instead of using a physical card. A lot of people think, I've got the physical card, that must be the most secure way to perform a transaction. No, that's probably your least secure way. You want to use Apple Pay. I always ask when I'm checking out, oh, do you take Apple Pay? Do you take Google Pay? Do you take Apple Pay? And if they say yes, go great, because that's a much more secure way to do this. Tokenization does describe that method of sending that token across the network, but that has nothing to do with a VLAN. Fail open means that we have a failure on the network, and when something fails, does the network continue to flow, or does the network break? So the fail open and fail closed is referring to those scenarios. Whenever you have some type of failure, you get to decide, how do we want to handle this should something fail? And fail open and fail close does describe that. I have a video on managing in those particular scenarios. Make sure you have a look at that if you want more information. And data at rest, we already know what data at rest is. How did we get 1%? We already went through data at rest. That's somebody who came in late, said 1%. So it's definitely not data at rest, which of course is data that's stored on some type of storage device. In this case, the answer that we were looking for, the one that most of you chose, was indeed logical segmentation. That very aptly describes the process of configuring and using a VLAN on your network. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Are we past the top of the hour at this point? Yes, just barely, but I think we can squeeze in one more question. Let's get another one into this particular live stream. This question, though, we're going to do a little bit differently. Same rules apply, of course. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. But I wanted to grab a question from my practice exams book. This is a book that I wrote because I just wasn't happy with the practice exams I was seeing on the internet. In fact, this is even still a problem where I run into practice questions on the internet that are not from exam objectives, from the latest version of the exam. I see some practice exams that are from 6 years ago, from 2 versions of the exam ago. They just don't apply. None of those topics are on the exam. You have to make sure that all of the study materials that you're using are specifically written with the version of the exam that you're using. So I've got the SY0-701. That's what you want to choose, is make sure yours says 701. If it says 601, if it says 501, or if it's using topics that are from those older versions, then your practice exams are out of date. I also thought that a lot of the practice exams I saw online were just wrong. They were incorrect, which happens quite a bit. And there were a lot of questions that I found online that certainly had some challenges in trying to understand what exactly a right answer would be and what exactly a wrong answer would be. So I thought I should spend some time, if I don't like what's out there, why don't I make my own questions? And so I did. And so this is a question directly from my practice exams book. Again, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This one asks, this is question A17. It's on page 8. We can work through the details of that. We have, which of the following would be the best way to provide a website login using existing credentials from a third-party site? The question answers are for this question are Federation, 802.1x, EAP, or SSO. Now, this is a PDF, which means if you are on a stylus or you have a tablet with a stylus, you can actually write on the screen. I have a lot of different annotation options on mine, so I could choose, for example, we'll do a green ink, and maybe if there's certain things that I want to highlight in these questions, I could certainly do that. There's no restrictions on this PDF. The other thing that's interesting about this PDF is that you could figure out if it's A, B, C, or D by visiting the quick answer page on page 33. But if you want the details, and I highly recommend you look through the details, they're on page 55. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that we're on page 8. It's a PDF. So what do? You scroll to page 55? No. That would take way too long to scroll all the way there and then scroll all the way back. Instead, I've got a link. If you put your mouse over the details, you'll notice that it turns into a little hand. And on the little hand, if you click that, it takes you to page 55. Just jumps right there. It's not rocket science, but it is kind of nice to have there. Which of the following would be the best way to provide a website login using existing credentials from a third-party site? The answer, of course, is A, Federation. And of course, I give you the reason why I think that is the right answer for this question. Now, whenever I'm answering questions online like this, I always choose the wrong thing. Maybe I chose EAP as the answer. Well, if you want to know why the wrong answers are wrong, on every question in my practice exams book, I give you not only a reason why the right answer is right, I tell you why all the wrong answers are wrong. Because it doesn't help you just to get it wrong. You want to know why you got the answer wrong. You want to finish up that loop so that you can really understand the details of that. So that hopefully will get you familiar with these topics like 802.1x, EAP, and SSO, and why they would not be the appropriate answer for this particular question. I'll also tell you that if you are looking at these technologies, maybe you got the answer straight off. Maybe you got Federation. Yeah, I know it's Federation. Next question. Before you go to the next question, take a moment and read through the incorrect answers. So on your exam, you might not get a question about Federation, but you might get a question about SSO. So reading through the wrong answers, it's almost like you're getting 4 different topics on every single question in my practice exams book. And once we're done, I'm going to use the back button. I have a back button in my PDF reader. You probably have a back button in your PDF reader as well. I'm going to click the back button, click, and now we're back to where we started. I can go to the next question that's on my list. Those are my practice exams. These include 3 separate 90-question practice exam. Each one of those 3 practice exams consists of 85 multiple choice questions and 5 performance-based questions. So there are 15 performance-based questions in this book. We not only have the physical version that you see here that you can purchase, I'll ship it to you, but if you get the physical version of any of my training materials, you also get access to the digital version for free. So that's what you see on your screen. That is the practice exams book. It's available at professormesser.com/securitype, or you can just go to my website. It's from the main menu. You'll find links to it there as well. Well, as you notice, a lot of what we talked about today was all related to the Security Plus exam objectives. These objectives are free. No cost for these objectives. You can download them directly from the CompTIA website, and they give you a bullet-by-bullet breakdown of every single thing you need to know for the exam. Everything. CompTIA stays so close to this list. Almost, I would say 100% of your exam is coming directly from this list. Very rarely do they add any topics that are outside the scope of this list. And even if they did, it wouldn't matter because you knew all of the other answers anyway. Let's say they stuck a question in there that wasn't from this list. The other 89 questions you would get right anyway because you know everything that is in here. This is an extensive, detailed list. This is your checklist of everything you need to know. So for those of you that are finishing up your studies and you're wondering, am I really ready for this exam? Go through the checklist. Go check off everything that's in here. Go through all the acronyms that are in the back. Become familiar with all the things that are on here. They are all listed as part of those objectives. They're available for you to download directly from the CompTIA website. You can either use my link at professormesser.com/objectives, or you can simply go to your favorite search engine, go to CompTIA Exam Objectives. It's a great way to work through the details of this. We do one of these live study groups every month. We'd love for you to join us on the next one. We have the next one planned for April the 23rd for Security Plus, but we do other live streams as well. For example, our next A+ study groups are on April the 8th and April the 10th. We have a Network Plus study group on April the 16th. And of course, there's our Security Plus study group on the 23rd. Sometimes these dates can change. There's the chaos that is my life sometimes requires me to move some things around from here and there. So if you are wondering when the next live event is going to be, you can always check the link on your screen. I always keep it updated at professormesser.com/calendar so that you'll know exactly when that will happen. Well, although the first hour is over, we got a lot more to go through. I want to go through your questions. I've been asking you all the questions. It's time for you to ask me some questions. We will do that in our after show. Stay exactly where you are. We'll go and show a screen here for a few seconds, and then we'll start our after show right after this. Don't forget about all of our weekly Security Plus pop quiz questions at professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/YouTube. And if you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to be able to send you information, an email that verifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and you would click on the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, I want you to put your name, your email address, in the subject line. Please put March 2025 Security Plus, or something close to that. That might be a good way to do it. And then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, VLAN segmentation. Today's super secret code words of the month are VLAN segmentation. So that would give you a way. You send that to me, and I will send you in about a week. You'll receive an email from me certifying that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category, continuing education unit credit, or CEU. And again, you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email. In the subject line, put March 2025 Security Plus, and in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, VLAN segmentation. And I'll be sure to get that back to you as soon as I can. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers on our website as well, professormesser.com/vouchers, for those of you that are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. And of course, our course notes are out on our website too, professormesser.com/701SB for our security course notes. This has been a great hour, but stick around. We have even more to come. We will talk all about the questions that you have for me in our after show. In the meantime, I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. All right, everybody, let me shift some things around in here and move some cameras around and push a button there. And it's time for our after show, everybody. Just like that, we've got an after show going on. After shows, we always have a good time. This is your opportunity to ask a question of me. I think I like the after shows so much because I have to prepare for the first hour. There's a lot of work that goes into writing questions for the first hour. There's no preparation involved for the second hour. Instead, I will go through your questions online. That's very selfish of me, isn't it? That's just an awful way to put this. But I think it's fun to get your questions also and being able to work through them. So hopefully that's something that can help you as well. That is exactly where you can focus. Let's see if we can go through the list of questions that you have, the way that you would submit those questions. I'm bringing it up on my screen, albeit very slowly. One moment, please. You can submit questions for this second hour at any time. Nope, not with that graphic. With this graphic, you can simply go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA. Yep, it's the same link we were using in the first hour. There's a tab on the top, and you can submit your questions at any time. Be able to have the details of this. We have a lot of questions that have been submitted, so I'm going to start going through the list that you have here and see what questions are available. There were a lot that we could go through on this one. We've got plenty to break through. Your questions that you could submit, by the way, they can be about Security Plus, they could be about certifications, they could be about CompTIA, they could be about the IT industry, or they can kind of be about anything that you would like. Just simply submit them by going to the link on your screen. Go to professormaster.com/QA to submit those. Let's now start, since we're talking about the industry and we're talking about jobs and we're talking about what we would do. Let's talk about a question from Khalid that asks, are there any help desk remote jobs? If so, any tips on landing one? Thanks a lot for the efforts you're putting in these videos. You're very welcome. So let's talk about the industry and what it does with remote access. We're sort of seeing a pendulum that is moving back and forth, albeit very slowly. Let's do a BC, before COVID. Before COVID, we had a number of people that were working remotely in IT. There was a significant number of people in IT that were working remotely, and I've worked with a number of them through the years, but not everybody. It certainly wasn't a common thing for people to be remote. And it is very uncommon for entry-level help desk or first-tier help desk to work remotely. Most first-tier help desks, or that first job you get in IT, is not going to be a remote position. It just isn't. We don't do that. We need to get you into an environment with other people where we can foster a set of knowledge points with you, or we can train you on the technologies that you're working with. You can become more familiar with the company. You can become more familiar with the people that you're working with, and you can become more familiar with the other groups in your company, because you will be interacting a lot with the desktop team, with the network team, with the data center team, with the security folks. There's a huge list of folks that you'll be working with, and we need to put you in an environment where you start interacting with them. And when you're working remote, you don't really have that level of interaction. And so most of what you will find for entry-level positions in IT will be an on-site position, or it will be one where you travel to that person. It's not a simple sit at your house and you have a remote position. As you move through the ranks of IT and you become more familiar with technologies, with the company, with the people, or you work yourself up to a level where you have a unique knowledge, where the information in your brain is something that we simply can't get anywhere else. Well, now you have a little more leverage. Now you have a little more control over where you work and how you work and when you work. So that becomes pretty useful if you're someone who is working through that. So hopefully you are someone who is working up to that point. Before COVID, a lot of the folks that were working remotely were the third tier or higher of support. So this would be perhaps people in a role where they were network troubleshooters, but they were really, really well-established, very experienced network people. They knew everything about everything on that network. So those are the people, especially in very big networks. Maybe I'm talking about people at AT&T, people at Verizon, people at T-Mobile, people at very large companies that are dealing with connectivity. These problems that occur that are very difficult to solve can occur anywhere in the world, and often do occur anywhere in the world. And so there might be someone in Orlando who's very familiar, who's been working with this company for 10 years. They're very familiar with the network. They have a knowledge that they have now garnered through the years that puts them into a position where they can fix any problem that happens to occur on their network, wherever it might be. Well, you don't want to require someone to hop on a plane every time there's a network problem and fly to wherever that is. That's completely unnecessary with today's technologies. Instead, they could stay at home and they can connect to a bridge of people, a conference call of people, a Zoom call of people, and they can work through the problem with that team, solve the issue wherever it happens to be in the world, and then check that one off their list and go to the next problem. Something very common to do. So a lot of what people want from a remote job, and I'm with you. I love working remotely. I love working at home. I think it is a great way to work, but it's not every role in an organization doesn't fit every role, is what I'm trying to say. That is something you have to work up to, especially in our post-COVID environment. I feel like a lot of organizations became concerned about the financial outlay of paying for a building that had nobody in it. And to that point, there is an advantage to having everyone in the same place. Because if you have a question about a problem, you can simply turn to the person next to you and say, are you aware of this issue? Are you more familiar with this technology? Have you run into this problem before? And if it's a problem that's really difficult, you can go over to the network team and say, here's what I'm seeing. What do you think? You can collaborate a lot better when you're in person. You simply can. You can argue that you can collaborate remotely, and it's a fine argument because you can. You just can collaborate better when you're in the same building, which is why a lot of organizations want people working together in the same room to be able to do these types of things. Larger organizations, I think it's easier. Larger organizations, you need to spread that knowledge out. And one way to spread the knowledge out is to have people in sitting at home or sitting at their desk, and they handle everything on a very large area. So I would say there are help desk remote jobs. The way that you would land one is a lot like trying to get to Carnegie Hall. It's practice, practice, practice. It's learning, it's knowledge, it's certification. It's creating a niche of knowledge that you yourself have that very few people have. And if you are that person, we will want you on that team. And maybe your organization uses a certain type of switch, a certain type of router, a certain type of firewall. You become an expert in all three of those. Now you can pretty much work wherever you want because we need your knowledge. Oh, you'd like to work at home? Sounds fine to me. You're on the phone all day anyway. Whether you're on the phone in your home office or you're on the phone in our office doesn't matter because we're not talking to you. You're talking with people that are in a different state, a different country, anywhere in the world. So that's what I would recommend if you are looking for that remote position and you're thinking, I'm not seeing a lot of these remote positions being advertised. It's true, you're not. But once you get up to a certain level, you now have a lot more flexibility and there are a lot more job offerings out there available to you. Maybe you like travel. There's a lot of jobs where you can travel. Maybe you like being in an office. There's a lot of jobs where you can be in an office. Maybe you like working at home. There are a lot of jobs where you can work from home. As you become more knowledgeable, as your expertise rises, you have a lot more control and flexibility as to what you are doing. So hopefully that gives you some perspective with that. Let's keep going through this list. Some folks asking some great questions, by the way. If you'd like to submit your question, you can do that anytime through the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can work through there. Let's see how we do with the other questions that you are submitting. Let's talk about this one. This is a good question I get occasionally, but it's a good one that we can kind of noodle through together. The question from Amanda asks, what are some types of home lab projects that would be good to build as we are studying for Security Plus? This is a good question because it kind of takes you beyond the scope of the exam objectives and occasionally going beyond that scope just a little bit with those same topics can be very, very useful. One of the things I have a video that's, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, and it's a video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video. In my world, that's a long video, but it is chock full of information. As many of you know, there's not a lot of slack in my videos. There's not a lot of dead time. I'm not spending my time telling a story. I'm not spinning yarns in my videos. We hit the content. We tell you what you need to know. We get out. That's our MO. That is our modus operandi here. We focus on doing things that way because, well, there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's another way that this video was created, how to get a job in IT with no experience. One of the things I mentioned in that 30-minute time frame are home lab projects and things you can do, because when you go to interview for a position, they know that you don't have experience. You know you don't have experience. The job isn't asking for experience or not much, but they would like you to have some practical knowledge. That's really what they're looking for. They're really looking for stories. And if you want to create stories for your interview, this is a great way to do it. We need to make home lab projects. One of the ones that I mentioned, one of the ones that I mentioned in my video is creating a home lab based on a firewall. The option I gave was pfSense, but there are a lot of open source firewalls available that you could choose from. Or maybe it's not an open source firewall. Maybe you've got your hands on a Palo Alto Networks firewall. Maybe you have a Checkpoint firewall. Maybe you have a Fortinet firewall. Yeah, bad taste in my mouth. But maybe you have one of those and you're working with them. You could tell I used to work at Palo Alto Networks. One of the ones that I worked with, though, is putting that onto the network, configuring it, getting my home traffic to go through it. I just did this recently with a Ubiquity firewall that I'm using. My Ubiquity firewall has a similar set of rule base, a similar style of working as every other firewall, but it has some unique features as well. And I can turn on things like the ability to look for intrusions. It has an IPS functionality. It looks for attacks, and it creates log files from these things. So if you were to create a virtual machine, you were able to install your own firewall. You were able maybe to add on intrusion prevention. One common combination that people will use is a pfSense firewall, and they will use Snort as an IPS. There's other options out there these days, perhaps even better options that you might want to combo together. But those are great ways to not only show someone how you did it and explain the process, perhaps more importantly, you're going to run into problems, because we always do when we're trying to learn something. In fact, if you don't run into a problem, you're not learning anything. You need to run into problems when you're going through this, and you need to document the problems that you're having and how you solve them. Do I sound like an interview question already? Yes, I do. Tell us about a problem, a technical problem you ran into, and how you solved it. That's just one of the top 5 questions you're always hit with when you're sitting down for a technical interview. So make sure you document when you have a problem, and you document what you did to fix it. Also, once you get this thing up and running, it's going to be able to provide you with a wealth of information about the things going over your network. Yes, even the Fortinet firewall will provide you with a wealth of information. They'll tell you what applications you're using, what websites you're connected to, how many websites you're connected to, what type of data is being transferred, how much of that data is being transferred. If any of the data on the internet trying to come inbound is part of a malicious type of software. Is anything being blocked at the firewall that has been identified as malicious? All of those things are incredibly interesting to talk about, especially if you go into the software and you create a report on it. And there's your story. Yep, I'm very familiar with these technologies, although I'm not running the type of firewall you have here. I recently installed my own pfSense firewall with some intrusion prevention. I plugged it into my home network. You can turn into clickbait right here, and you can say, "And you'll never believe what I found." You want to pull them in. You want to pull them in on the interview. There's your story. You'll never believe what I found. Instantly saw people trying to attack my network. Instantly saw how many places I was connecting to and didn't know it. And here's the report. There's nothing a hiring manager likes more than a report. And if there's a chart on it, it's even better. So you could see how many in an hour I had 675 instances of someone trying to break into my network. So you've got, and here's who they were, and here's their IP addresses, and here's what my firewall blocked. That is a great story. That's a fantastic, let me explain to you how I did it and how important it was, and I can do this for you as well. That's just one of the many stories that you could create. I think firewalls are a good choice since it's Security Plus. Another good choice, although a little bit more difficult to implement, but not much more, especially if you got a virtual environment that you've set up. Maybe you set up VPN connectivity between 2 devices. Maybe you set up an IPsec tunnel. And if you have an existing firewall, many of today's firewalls can also be a VPN concentrator and will act as one end of an IPsec tunnel. Many firewalls also act as an end-user VPN connection, more of what we call an SSL VPN. But let's talk more about IPsec, because quite honestly, that's a little more impressive to someone when you're talking at a technical level, because they know how difficult it is to set up an IPsec tunnel. They know that there's phase 1 and phase 2. They know that there's challenges with getting different encryption and cryptography between those two coordinated. They know that there are challenges with using certificates versus a shared passphrase. There are many challenges with anybody who's put together and connected up a significant number of IPsec tunnels. They know that there's a challenge associated with this. In fact, I would say if you are putting together an IPsec tunnel, the hard part about IPsec is interpreting the log file telling you what's wrong. Notice I didn't say is getting this tunnel up and running the very first time. You're not getting it up and running the very first time. There's going to be something wrong, especially if you're connecting unlike components together. Connecting things like a Palo Alto Networks firewall to another Palo Alto Networks firewall with IPsec is pretty easy because they built their software that way. You give it a passphrase, boom, it connects, you're done. Well, that's easy. That didn't break anything. That's no good. I want to be able to put a Palo Alto Networks firewall and connect it to a Cisco router or connect it to a checkpoint firewall and get those two things connecting to each other. That would be remarkable. But you will always run into inconsistencies in the language, the nomenclature, the style of variables you're supposed to use, that even though they're both using the IPsec standard, even though they're both going through the same phase 1 process, they're going through the same phase 2 process, there's different names that are used for the different parameters. And it's easy to mix them up when you're trying to connect. There's also differences in how they send data. It might be a policy-based VPN versus a route-based VPN. Different set of standards when you're setting it up and how you determine what software, what packets go across that network, what frames really get routed over those connections. So that is why I often tell people, set those up, try it out, see where it broke. When it breaks, document it. And then once you get it up and running, explain how you were able to fix it. And then get a report. There's your second story that you bring into that piece. So there's just a couple of home lab projects. You could probably think of many more. If you are in Security Plus, even though it's a networking thing, you might want to try downloading something like Packet Tracer. That's a free network, not really a simulator, more of an emulator of Cisco products and other components that you can run on your machine, either Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. So it works across multiple operating systems, and it's incredibly powerful. It looks and feels just like a Cisco router. It looks and feels just like a Cisco switch. And you can even put separate computers, virtual computers on the ends of these things and send packets across them. And you can even do kind of a bullet time. You can stop time, send a packet, and then you can watch the packet as it goes from your device to a switch. And then what does the switch do? It sends it to a router. And then what does the router do? It sends it across to another router. So you know that your switch forwarding works properly. You know that your routing tables are set up the right way. And you can see it go all the way through the connections to the other side. It's a great learning tool. You can build out a virtual network in a matter of seconds. A lot of people often say, well, should I just buy Cisco equipment? Why would you do that? Do you not know how to plug in an RJ45 connector? Because that's all you're really learning is plugging in, okay, I plugged it in. There you go. I'm glad I learned how to plug in an RJ45 cable. No, what you want is a virtual environment where you can set it up, tear it down, and build it again in a matter of moments. You can build and have much more flexibility with something like Packet Tracer than you would ever have over something like a live switch, a live router. And Packet Tracer, it's free. Technically, cost-wise, it's free. You do have to register on the Cisco website. So they'll take that out of you. There's that piece of it. So in the internet world, perhaps not completely free, but free enough. There's no cash outlay, which is great too. Packet Tracer, just Google it. You'll find it. It's over on the Cisco website. You have to create a login because you do log into Packet Tracer when you're working through it. So that's what I would recommend, Amanda. Try some of those things. I think that will get you well on your way to fighting problems, pulling your hair out, trying to figure out why it's not working the way it should. And of course, you're documenting everything as you go through that list. Those are the projects I would recommend. So hopefully that's giving you some things to work on. Let's keep going through the questions that you have. We got others in this list. A lot of great questions that are coming in. Thank you for submitting them. And as a reminder, again, you could submit them at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA to make that happen. We have a lot that are in this list. I'm sort of scanning through them as we're going through these pieces. There are a lot to pour through. Here's one that I think kind of fits into the same, it's kind of an adjunct to the question we just saw. This one asks, what is your advice for someone who wants to be a SOC analyst? A SOC? Like on your foot? Like I said, no. This is SOC. This is a Security Operations Center analyst. This is something that if you're in a relatively large-sized company, they're probably going to have a SOC. They're probably going to have kind of a standard generic help desk. They will probably have a NOC, Network Operations Center. You knew that already. And they might also have a SOC, a Security Operations Center, because there is a need to watch, monitor, and observe from a security perspective what's happening on your network. And you'll want to address those through the SOC. Now, because of this, you need people in the SOC that are familiar with different types of technologies at different levels. For example, there may be a group of people that are receiving calls, triaging, and forwarding tickets to the right people. That's sort of the entry level of the SOC. I often mention this as someone, because a lot of people would like to get into security, but one of the big stumbling blocks, one of the big gates that doesn't allow people to get into security is that you have to have some level of knowledge with operating systems and networks and security right on top of that. Wouldn't it be great if there were more entry-level positions? I mean, truly entry-level. You have no other knowledge about IT, and you really want to get that first job, but you'd like it to be in cybersecurity, or what the world is calling cybersecurity, which doesn't actually have a definition, but we're going to call it that here anyway. That cybersecurity side of things, there are a number of companies that will hire entry-level into the SOC. So that might be a good place to look at if you're looking for an entry-level security position. It's really more of a help desk position that has an emphasis in security. Doesn't matter. You got your foot in the door. You got the job. That's what matters. So as I talk to you about what is good and what is bad, where security should go, what you have to be able to know to get a really good job in IT security and get that operating system and get the networking knowledge, you may be able to get in at a lower level by taking that first job in the SOC, in the Security Operations Center. It's a great place to go. Now, if you're planning to be competitive in your Security Operations Center, it will help if you first have that entry-level help desk knowledge, but it also helps if you have knowledge in operating systems and knowledge in networking. Those are the very important parts of understanding what you need to know just to start learning the world of IT security. Becoming an expert in Windows, becoming knowledgeable in Linux, knowing how Mac OS operates, especially from a security perspective, are extremely valuable. And then add on top of that, any knowledge of switching, routing, wireless, encrypted communication, VPN, IPsec, and even more on the network side. Those are also critical for IT security. And you can take all of those. That's really what's going to give you the best way to get into IT security. But you may be able to kind of get at the bottom level and work your way up by going to a Security Operations Center. So that's what my recommendation would be. Maybe that can give you some ideas of things you might want to concentrate on if that's something that might be interesting for you. Let's keep going through our list. We got a lot of great questions on here. Here's more of a question about a question. I like these. I like questions about questions. This is from Stan, who asks, in the exam, will the question specify which will have multiple correct answers? In the exam will be specified question which have multiple correct answers. I think we got it. I think we figured it out, Stan. No worries. So this is something that the CompTIA exams are actually pretty good about. is that when you are reading through the questions on the exam, they will tell you what they want you to do. Most of the questions will be multiple choice, so you'll simply choose A, B, C, or D. Relatively straightforward. There'll be radio buttons on the screen, which means you can only choose one of them, and if you choose another one, the radio button jumps to that one as being selected. We're very familiar with that. There will be some questions on the exam, however, that might want you to choose more than one answer. But they don't say choose all that apply, which, by the way, is the sign of a bad test giver, because that's a ridiculous thing to ask, especially when the questions and the answers are so vague. On the CompTIA exam, there are very specific questions with a very specific set of answers, and they will tell you if you need to select more than one of them. The question actually says, pick 2 from this list, pick 3 from this list. So they will tell you how many they expect you to select. And when you do that, they will absolutely tell you, if you didn't pick 2, they'll say, wait, didn't pick 2. You sure about this? Are you coming back later? What's going on? So make sure that you are familiar with the exams themselves and that you read all of the question, because it will tell you what you need to do. Pick 2, pick 3. That way you at least know what's coming up. So hopefully that's familiar with, or you will become familiar with this when you take your first exam, but they kind of hold your hand through it. They don't make it weird. I've also noticed that they've kind of moved away from negative questions on the exam. For example, you probably will not see on your exam a question that says, which of the following things is not one of these? Which, by the way, is the worst kind of question when you've gone through 50 questions that are asking you what something is, and then suddenly they ask you a question about what something isn't. But now the logic there, you have to kind of shift everything around. And then on the next question, you have to know what it is. So fortunately, CompTIA does not tend to ask these negative questions anymore or ask you what something is not. They almost always are asking you what something is, fortunately. I'm glad they got away from that piece of it. And one of the things that I think would be useful if you get into the world of IT and going through these certifications, this won't be the only certification exam you ever take. There will be certification exams that you will take throughout your career at different levels from different organizations. The CompTIA exams are really well laid out. First, they tell you everything you need to know. The exam objectives, hardly anyone does that. Cisco doesn't do that. Microsoft doesn't do that. The folks at Amazon don't do that. The folks at Red Hat does not do that. It's hard to get a completely annotated list of everything you need to know for this exam. CompTIA does it on all their exams, which is great because you know exactly what to study and you don't go outside the scope of what the exam is asking for. The other thing that's important is that they really do tell you all the way through the exam what's expected of you. Drag and drop, put this here, pick 2, pick 3, true or false, or whatever it happens to be. So you have other options there to work through. That might give you some ideas of things to look at on the exam, but I think the exams themselves do a very good job of focusing on what's important and what isn't important as you step through these. Let's do some more questions that you have. I want to fit in as much as I can before we run out of the list. So here's one that talks more about how in the process of studying. This is from Michael, who asks, hi, Professor Messer. After finishing your SY0-701 videos, what is the best way to use your 3 practice exams? Should I space them out or do them back to back? Also, what's the best next steps in study practices once I'm done with the videos? So you got a few options here when you're working through it. I think you should focus on a number of different aspects to this. For example, I think that if you are someone who is working through understanding a particular topic, for example, you're working through understanding your practice exams, the back-to-back practice exams, and you're trying to go through them. I have a 4-step process, or at least a 4-phase, a 4-element process for studying. It's called WRAP, W-R-A-P. I think it's important that you watch the videos, that you are. Read a book. I think books provide information in a different way than videos. So I think they are an important part to your studies. The A is you're applying some of the knowledge that you have gained through the use of labs. That's the A in WRAP. And the P is the practice exams. So the practice exams should be the last thing you do. Here's a mistake I see people making all the time, is that they will start their studies. They decide, let's not watch the videos yet. Let's take the practice exams. They do. And they'll take an entire practice exam. And they go, wow, I took this practice exam and I got a 40%. And I really didn't understand much of what I was reading. I really didn't find those practice exams very good. That's what they'll tell me. And I'll ask, well, how much studying have you done? How far are you through the video course? Oh, I haven't started. Well, yeah, I'm surprised you got a 40, quite honestly. Well done. At least that's better than, the 25% you would randomly do. But it's still not very good. It's not a passing score, certainly. You don't want to start with your practice exams. Practice exams are a way that you can verify and validate what you have learned. And really the best way to do that is to go through the practice exams after you watch the videos, after you've read the book, after you do the labs. Practice exams, the last thing you do. It's the P in WRAP. So it's the last thing. That's in that order is what you want to do. So make sure that if you have a set of practice exams, maybe you got my course notes, maybe you got my practice exams, and you started going through the videos, but this practice exams book, it's right here. Let's just look at some of them. No, be strong. Don't look at it yet. Put it away. Put it out of here. We'll throw it over here. There. No, we're not looking at the practice exams right now. We're going to watch the videos. We're going to read a book. We're going to do some labs, maybe do a home lab, maybe do some of the things we were talking about earlier. Then finally, we're now ready to see, do we really know this stuff? Oh, I guess I should get my practice exams book again. There, I found it. I threw it over here. Now we can read through the practice exams book. And you could do it as a timed process. Maybe you want to test yourself on how well you can get through these 90 questions in 90 minutes, which is exactly what the exam will be like. Or maybe you just want to start gathering as much detail as you can from every question. And there's a good advantage and disadvantages to both of those study methods. If you're going through like you're taking an exam, you'll get a better feel for time frame. You'll get a better feel for how fast you should be iterating through question after question after question, but it might cause you to go faster than you normally would. There's a lot of great stuff in these practice exams book. I know that sounds a little self-serving, but I really do believe that's the case. I spent a lot of time documenting every single right question and every single wrong question. Every single question has been thought about and has been designed to give the same style and to emulate the same voice as the actual exam. So I'm not just making these questions up out of thin air. I'm thinking about how would CompTIA ask this question, and I'm structuring my questions to match that. So there's a lot of that there. So this is a very good example of waiting until the last part to really step through the practice questions. But if you don't time yourself, that gives you a lot more time to really think about the question and really think about the answers. So that's really up to you. See if that's something that fits your style of study. Maybe that's something that maybe you like the idea of really testing yourself by time. Maybe you like the idea of going slowly through it, but you got 3 exams in here. So maybe you do the first one as a timed exam. Maybe you do the second one as let's take it slowly and just take it a question at a time and break them apart and really try to understand why this is right and why this is wrong. And then maybe the third one, we go back to time. It's up to you. You've got complete control of this. So all of those are in the practice exams book. You get to decide how you use them. And I document both of those. There's a section right in the beginning of the practice exams book, aptly titled, How to Use This Book. And I try to tell you, there's lots of ways you could use this book. Here's a couple of ways you can do it. It effectively just describes what I described to you here. So I know we like to flip through the first part and go straight to the questions. There's some actually good stuff in the first part. You might want to read through it. and be able to understand it. And of course, you could do this as the physical book that I have or the PDF that we were looking at earlier. You get to decide. The PDF is what I call on my site the digital edition, and then the actual printed book is the physical edition. So you can pick either the digital edition or the physical edition for both of those. Let's keep going through your list. See what's available. Here we go. Let's shift gears from Security Plus to A+, shall we? It's from Logan, who asks, should I grind out the A+ 1101, 1102 before it expires, since all the course content is available now? Or should I wait for the course content for 1201 and 1202? For those not familiar with A+, the A+ exam, just like the Network Plus, just like Security Plus, just like many of the CompTIA exams, that course content gets updated every 3 years. So in this particular case, we are one day, yesterday, CompTIA updated and introduced the new version of their A+ exams, the 220-1201 and the 220-1202. Of course, their existing set of exams, the 220-1101 and the 220-1102, have already been out for 3 years. The 1101 and 1102 don't go away until September 25th. So we're in this really interesting time frame where both sets of exams are available at the same time. The reason they do this, of course, is so that if you've been studying for the existing exam, that everything just doesn't shut down on one day and you have to restart everything you're doing. That would be incredibly inefficient, especially since, as you will find very quickly if you go look, Logan, out there on the market, there are very few study materials available for the 1201 and 1202 because it just came out yesterday. That's just a normal part of this. Usually it takes about 3 months for the industry to get out all of the study materials so that you have some options available to you. But even then, a relatively small number of people will have taken the newer exam as compared to the old exam. There's a lot more information available for the 1101 and 1102. There's a lot more study materials available, and that exam doesn't go away until September 25th. You have 6 months to complete your studies for both of those exams, which is plenty of time. So if I was starting my studies for A+ right now, I would be studying the 220-1101 and 1102 because there's tons of study material available. There's tons of people who have taken this exam and have given their opinions of the exam itself, and it's much easier to find study materials for it. It's much easier to find practice exams. It's much easier to find videos. It's much easier to find books. So why wouldn't you go with what's easier? At the end of this, let's say that you took the 1100 series and you passed those exams, you're now A+ certified. So some people say, well, I don't want the old one. I want the new one. So they will wait. So in fact, that's one of the things that Logan says, should I wait? Well, the people that are fighting for the same jobs that you are fighting for, the people that are trying to compete for those same seats that you are competing for, they would love it if you would wait, because they want to get certified and they want to show a prospective employer, I'm certified. By the way, Logan isn't. He decided to wait, but I'm already certified. So which one of us is probably more ready to take on this particular role? Probably not Logan. Logan waited. So that's my argument, by the way, for this. It's actually a pretty good argument. You never want to wait to get certified. You should always take what is available for you right now. Now, obviously, if your life is one where you know that you will never be able to get through the A+ exams in 6 months, that there's the timing of this just doesn't work out. I think most people can probably get it done in 6 months, no problem. But maybe 3 months from now, we revisit. Maybe 3 months from now, we look around and think, all right, there's a good number of study materials out for the newer exam. We've now only got 3 months left to finish up the old exam. Maybe that's a good time to make the transition. So there's a lot of variables here. There's a lot of things to consider. There's a lot of challenges with making sure you do the right one. But as we sit here today, where the newer exam was only released yesterday, to the point that even the CompTIA website is not completely up to date with all of the content for the new exam, I think that's our clue. I think that's our hint that perhaps we should spend our time focusing on the existing, well-established, well-documented, and available exam materials for the 220-1101 and to 2011-02. That's my recommendation. Never, never, never wait to get certified. There's practically no good reason to do that and lots of bad reasons to do that. Let's keep going through the list. Let's go and see if we've got others that are here. A lot of great questions coming in, by the way. Thank you for submitting those. Let's keep going through this list. Other questions that we have. There's some good stuff in here. Thank you so much for submitting these. I'm sort of flipping through. I've got very little time, and I want to find one that will really have the biggest effect for most people who are watching right now. There's a lot of good stuff here. This one's pretty good, actually. Let's see if this one takes me back a bit between all of these. This is from Alan. Alan asks, having worked in IT for years, thank you, Alan, for not saying a generation. What common mistakes have you seen beginners make on the job, specifically where you worked at the same company? Oh, we all have stories. Oh, the stories, the common mistakes beginners make on the job. This is, I'll give you first mistakes I have made on the job and yet not fired. And then I'll give you mistakes that other people have made on the job that totally got them fired. I'll take you down these stories. Let's talk about the one where I completely screwed up. You're going to screw up, by the way. There will be times when you do exactly the wrong thing and you delete important data, bring down a system, destroy somebody's work, make a system unavailable. Happens all the time. It's just a nature of the beast. It's part of the job. You need to be prepared for when this is going to happen to you. This will happen to you. In my case, I was working at a remote site. We were based in Miami. We had flown to California to do a wide area network installation. We were upgrading a WAN connection. And as part of that upgrade, we had to perform a firmware upgrade of the router. And someone had started the firmware upgrade. The router wasn't installed in the rack yet. It was sitting on top of a rack, kind of catty corner. I thought, well, that's going to fall off or something. That just doesn't look very safe. Let me straighten out that router. And then the power got popped out of the back as I was moved. No wonder it was sitting in a catty corner, because if you try to straighten it out, it tightens up the power cord and the power cord popped out of the back. In the middle of a firmware upgrade that is now non-recoverable on the only router we have at that remote site. So fortunately, there was a production router in place already. We were upgrading to this new one, but we've flown out to do this project. And now I just ruined the router for this project. It was all on me, 100%. I did it. So we had to fortunately, it was in the middle of the day. We called Miami and said, could you guys send another router out? Just put it on the next plane so that it can land here tonight, please. Like, what's going on? What do you need? Don't ask questions. I don't want to talk about it. Just send me another router. It's going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to ship it out here. And they decided to keep me on board. Even after that, we did ship the router out. It did get sent. Guess who had to go to the airport and pick up the router? That's right. I did. I had to do everything for the rest of the trip because of that. Everybody had to extend the trip another day. There was a cash outlay thanks to my ignorance, thanks to my dumbness of just, I shouldn't have ever touched it. In retrospect, don't touch things. So what common mistakes have I seen beginners make on the job? Don't touch stuff. If it's sitting there, find out what's going on before you push a button, before you make a change, before you move something. Just ask the question. Just ask the question of somebody around you. If for no other reason, then Bob said it was okay. So at least there's now two of us in the hot seat. That's the idea. So that's my first recommendation to you. Sometimes you'll run into something that doesn't look quite right. That's not right. Let's plug that over here. No, you just brought down the entire site. doing those types of things. So that's one thing. Let's take this to a security perspective. Let's take a job. I've told this story before, but it's been a while, and we're at the top of the hour. I'll still squeeze it in. So I was working as a senior director for voice and data networking for a third-party call center. Third-party call centers, by the way, are the call centers that companies will hire to be their call center. So when you call, at the time, when you call your credit card company, the credit card company may not have their own call center. They may be hiring seats at different call centers that are run by different companies. Of course, the person who answers the phone says, "Hi, thank you for calling Visa Card Center," or whatever it is. "This is James. How can I help you?" But they don't really work for Visa. Now, they're really working for the third-party call center. My job was to make sure that this entire call center, with all of the different customers that we had, all of these different, very different types of calls that were coming in, that all the calls were coming in, all the phones were working, all the data was working, the network connectivity was working, the internet connectivity was working, the firewalls were up and running, the routers and the switches were operating. That was my responsibility. I had a team of people underneath me that were managing voice, that were managing data, that were managing the billing for the voice and the data, all of these types of things. So in that particular environment, and back at that time, the voice side of the call center was run by a very large PBX, a phone switch. This was where everybody's analog phone connected to this phone switch. It was a big multi-rack phone switch. They all generally run on Unix. It was an AT&T Lucent type switch, and it was big. It was, I mean, these switches cost $1.5 million, $2 million to install into a data center of our size. They're big switches. We had 1,000 people. I had 1,000, 1,500 seats at a data center, at a call center for these types of things. One day, the phone switch rebooted. Now, for those of you familiar with PBXs, familiar with the hardening and the reliability of phone switches, they don't go down. They never break. They never reboot. A phone switch rebooting is something that puts, first, every phone in the place stops working. And when you got 1,500 people on the phone and none of them can make a phone call, and you're the one responsible for the phones, that's a bit of a problem. That never happens. So of course they say, a phone switch suddenly rebooted. I picked up the phone on my desk. Nothing. Not what someone who manages phone and data for a company that is a call center wants to have happen. So I'm on it at that point. What is going on? I go into, I'm not phone switch savvy either. I'm a networking person, but I had great phone people who worked for me. So I went to them, and they, of course, they're already in the data center. They're already got in the door. They're on the console. They're typing away. And I said, "What's happened? What happened there?" They go, "We don't know. It's rebooting right now. We're watching the reboot. Rebooting looks like it's working normally. Yep, everything. Okay, we're back up. You know, we got a 10, 15 minute outage, which is, that's a lot. And for your phone switch, that's huge. So obviously this brought all eyes to the problem. Why did the phone switch reboot? Nobody was in the data center. Nobody was near the phone switch. Phone switch itself had been operating flawlessly for years, and nothing had been changed. Then we started looking at logs. We started looking at what was going on, and we looked at the logs of the phone switch, and everything started focusing on something was happening over the network. The phone switch, like everything, is connected to our network, had an IP address, the type of thing. Everything was kind of focused on something happened on that network connection that caused the phone switch to reboot. That obviously shouldn't happen, but it did happen. So our next question was, what IP addresses were associated with this weird log message that we saw? And it pointed back to a machine that was in IT, but it was just a computer on somebody's desk. It wasn't, I was expecting, it was a DDoS from a big hacking group out of Europe. And no, It was a desk, but nobody was at the desk. In fact, the computer's there, and we brought up the desktop. There's Word, there's Excel, there's nothing on this machine. What did this machine do that would cause this multi-million-dollar phone switch to reboot? Then we went into the registry. We started doing some forensics, and we started looking at the logs inside of Windows. And we saw that there was some software on that machine that had been recently removed, uninstalled, deleted. But of course, the registry entries were still there because no uninstall programs just don't work. They don't uninstall anything. Oh, well, they might want to install this later, so let's leave the registry entries. And to be fair, it doesn't hurt anything usually to have those in there. In this case, it didn't hurt anything either. But we saw that there was a certain type of software that was uninstalled. And then we went to the Windows logs and we saw what had been uninstalled, and it was a vulnerability scanner. Someone had run a vulnerability scan on our network and had run not just a very passive, let's see what's out there kind of scan. They ran an incredibly invasive scan of a very particular IP block that just so happened to have the phone switch in it. And because this was running actual vulnerabilities against this particular machine, it happened to cause, and this was a while ago. So our technologies weren't quite as savvy with handling these types of problems. And the phone switch certainly wasn't. The phone switch got some type of vulnerability check against it that caused it to go into a mode that caused in fact, they found a vulnerability. They found that was vulnerable, all right, because it caused a kernel panic and the entire system rebooted. Who sat at this desk? So we found out the contractor who just started, who was a relatively young fellow, and we brought him in a room and we said, "How you doing? What's going on? Tell us what happened." "What? I don't know. Nothing happened. What are you talking about?" There was deny, until we said, "And what about this registry entry? And what about this?" We started showing it was good cop, bad cop. It was a very bad good cop, bad cop. We said, "No, we're pretty aware what happened. We aren't sure. We know what software you used. We know where you used it. We know what time it was. We know where you were. Should we go to the video? Should we go look at people going in and out at this point?" He goes, "No, okay, yeah, I ran this thing. It was me." And he admitted to the problem. And because he admitted to the problem, there was no law enforcement. That was part of the deal. Should we just call the cops now? Because there's some serious problems going on right here. And he goes, "No, it was me. Don't call the cops." But we definitely picked up his stuff and escorted him out and called the company that he was contracted with and said he cannot come back now, unfortunately. Do not run unauthorized vulnerability scans on a network when you're not trained in the vulnerability software. You don't have permission to run the vulnerability scan because you could break something really, really important. You could break things that were not important, which is still just as bad, really. You should not be doing this at all to be able to make that happen. And he worked really hard to hopefully scrub it. "I wasn't here. La, 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 was not here." No, you were totally here and we found it, and that's why. So it was such an easy thing to have not done. It was such a mistake. And I'm sure to this day he regrets doing it. I felt bad for him for having done it, but it certainly taught me that if you don't know 100% what you are doing, you need to check with other folks. And you should feel comfortable telling people, "I'm not 100% on this one. Can you fill in the gap for me?" And it's remarkable when I started doing that, when I started showing up in places and people would say, "Do you know how this works?" And if I knew, I would go, "A little bit. I've worked with it some, but not a lot." Because the technical person goes, "Yes, I do know this. I am very knowledgeable and I am very smart and I will fix everything." But if you don't, you've now set an expectation that's not realistic. A much more reasonable, and I would argue much healthier and indeed much more efficient way to handle this would be to tell people the truth. That's a crazy idea. And tell them, I have no knowledge in this. I've never worked with that before, but I know people that have. And let's talk to them because they'll tell us what we can touch and what we cannot touch, what we can change, what we cannot change. And we'll put together a plan so that whatever we do, we can easily revert back if we mess something up. That's a perfectly reasonable answer because we all in IT know that not everybody knows everything. And when you first get into IT, you're worried that you're not going to know something and that somebody's going to find out you don't know that. Well, as it turns out, everybody in IT doesn't know something. We all don't know something. IT is too big. There is no possible way you, human being, can possibly know everything there is to know about everything that is going on your network, on your systems, on your servers, in your infrastructure. There's just no way to do it. So if you become more open to the idea that you are trying to figure it out, and you tell other people, I don't know, but I know where to get the answer. I know what we should be doing, and let's figure it out together. Now you're learning as you go. That's your first foray into that particular topic. You've now gone through the process. You've gotten the smart people involved. You've gotten a group together that can step you through. You are now invested in that and you're learning. Guess what happens next time you're presented with this? Somebody says, hey, do you know anything about this? Like, oh, I know a lot about this. Let's figure out what's going on. You become the expert. You should be the sponge. You should be the one constantly saying, I don't know. Because the more you say, I don't know, the more you're going to learn. And indeed, oddly enough, the more respect you get from other people. I can't tell you how many training classes I've been in. The highest level I got in my career technically was as a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks. These are incredibly complex systems, complex firewalls with amazing amounts of technology in the middle. And then when I was working there, these were brand new systems. These were brand new technologies the world had never seen. We were all learning it as we went. And one of the things that in these classes, they would talk about the automaton that was used to do the app ID inside of the Palo Alto Networks firewall. And I just raised my hand like, I don't, you wrote this thing up there. What is that? How is it getting from point A to point B there? Like, oh, yeah, I really didn't put that. Let's break it down. And they broke it down. And that's how we got from point A to point B. And then we'd walk out of the room. I'm with a bunch of other engineers that are my peers. They're just working and doing the same thing I'm doing in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And some of them would come up to me and say, I'm so glad you asked that. I had no idea what was going on between point A and point B. I said, well, why didn't you ask? And he goes, I don't want to seem like I'm stupid. I want to seem like I'm ignorant. I said, well, you're in luck because I don't mind looking stupid. I'm good at looking stupid. I can look stupid all day because that's the only time I learn anything. I got to a point where whenever there was a training class, I sat in the front. I asked the questions as we went. And if you can do that, if you can be comfortable enough with your ignorance that you are willing to ask the question, you will become smarter in the end. And even though you think you're showing a weakness, you're really showing a strength. It's not only working for you personally, it's also working in the way that other people are looking at you and understanding, okay, this guy's a straight shooter. If he knows, he knows. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And you will feel very uncomfortable doing this initially. But as you become more knowledgeable in different things, as you get more certifications, as you become more comfortable with a certain operating system, as you become more knowledgeable in performing packet traces, as you become more knowledgeable in setting up and designing routed and switched networks, now you have a knowledge base that is a foundation that you can stand on. And it becomes a little bit easier to be the I don't know person when you know that you've got a foundation that you're already standing on. Nobody can look at you and go, well, you're just saying I don't know because you're just a dummy. No, they're saying, well, this guy's very knowledgeable. He knows switching, he knows routing, he knows operating systems. He's very good with these things. Let's now give him a little more nugget of knowledge. Let's build on that. Let's level him up a little bit. Let's make the foundation a little bit stronger. Let's build it up a little bit higher. That's what you should be focusing on. Is if you're the dumb one in the room, then you're learning. If you are in a training class and you know everything they're talking about, and you go to your day-to-day job and you're the one in the room when somebody asks a question, if you're the one they're always looking to for the answer, you are in the wrong room. You should never be the smartest one in the room. You should be in a position where you're always learning, you're always pushing yourself, you're always learning from someone else, or you're learning together with the people that are around you. That job that I had at Palo Alto Networks was a great one because we were all ignorant of the technology. It was technology the world had never seen before. The same way the cloud, when it came out, was all new technology, continues to be new. AI, all these technologies continue to be new. You're not going to find an expert with 5 years of experience in generative AI because it hasn't been around for 5 years. It sort of has, but not in the way that we are using it today. So be that person, be the one willing to ask the question, be the one who's willing to say, I don't know, hold on. Could you just step through that one more time so that my little pea brain can figure that one out? You can make a joke about it because everybody knows you don't have a pea brain. Everybody knows you're smart enough to be in the room. You just need to be the one who knows when everybody leaves the room, do you have the knowledge you need to take that somewhere else and be able to apply it? And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to ask the question, take all the doubts, make them into something realistic, make them something you can follow. It's going to make you a better technician. It's going to make you a better employee. It's going to make you move up the ladder faster. It's going to give you more flexibility. You're going to make more money. You're going to have better jobs. All of these things come into play. So think about that as you go through what you are doing in your career, the things that you are planning on, the processes you have in place. Sometimes these things change under our feet because of the way we act. What you thought you were going to be doing in this career turns out to be something else because you asked the question, because you said, how does that work? I know nothing about that. Can you tell me? In my career, that's exactly what happened with operating systems. That's exactly what happened with networking. That is exactly what happened with security. Is I saw that technology and said, how does that work? Next generation firewall, what is that about? Tell me more. And the only way you're going to learn is when you don't know. And you're not going to be able to make that happen unless you tell people, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Let's make it happen. So those are two examples of one where I broke everything and one, thankfully, where someone else broke everything. It wasn't just me. It wasn't me messing up the entire network. It was actually someone else. Was that the same job? No, it was a different job. It's a different job. Those were two different organizations that got screwed up. One of them was me. One of them was someone else. So don't worry when it happens to you. There will be a lot of people going, yes, yeah, we were there. We've been there. We've had it. Don't worry about it. We'll get through it. Later on, we'll laugh about it. May not be tomorrow, but later on, we will laugh about all of this, and you will too. Don't worry about any of that. Well, I think that brings us to a good place to finish up for today. We went a little bit of overtime. I hope that's okay with you. Thank you so much for your time in the first hour going through the Q&A. Thank you for your questions in the second hour. Always get such interesting things coming in. Maybe some ideas that you can now use for your Security Plus studies and for working on getting that next position in IT, or maybe your first position in IT. I'd love to see that as well. Of course, we do one of these every month. Make sure you check our calendar for when the next live event is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. I'm heading over to Discord after this. We'd love to see you on our Discord channel at professormesser.com/Discord, or simply use the Discord icon in the upper right of our website. Thanks for being here, everybody. Good to see everyone. Have a great rest of the month. We'll see you next month with the rest of our study groups, and next time on our Security Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.